I'm not as well prepared as that. First of all, I would like Paul Martin, Michael Carden, Wendell Roseveare and Sharon Dane. Would you just stand for a moment? Would you be embarrassed to do that? And Mike, did I say Michael? Yes. And Paul, and where's Wendell's at the back. Are there any more contributors here that I've missed? These are people from your own community who've contributed very willingly to this book and allowed me to harass them about their spelling or their punctuation or whatever it was. Usually I was the one in error. So I want you to be proud of the contribution from the Brisbane community, because I'm very grateful for the work you put into it. I know how busy you all are. Thank you. You'll see there, Michael Kirby, Justice Michael Kirby, was giving me a hard time on Sunday at the Sydney launch because, as he mentions in his foreword, he criticises the book two ways in his foreword. And I knew that he was going to ask me these questions at the launch, and I still wasn't very good at answering them. But he was complaining that the book was arranged in alphabetical order of author. He wanted it organised sort of thematically, which I had done, various versions of. But I pointed out to him that there is a list of contributors at the front of the book, and it actually gives a little bio about them, but also there's a sentence about what their thing is about. He said it was a state of chaos not to know when you opened the next chapter whether that person was a marriage agnostic or a believer. And he found that, I suppose because of his rigorous and lengthy judicial training, he likes things to be better organised than I usually am. He has no idea how hard it was for me to pull this together. I want you to know that my Christian publisher, married man, 3 children, proposed this book. He just rang me up in February when I was planning to do something quite different and said, why don't we do a book on gay marriage? And I said, correct language please, not gay marriage. It's not a gay car or, marriage equality for same-sex couples or same-sex attracted couples, but we're not going to use the old terminology. And I imagine in about 5 years' time, even that terminology won't be appropriate anymore. So Michael was giving me a hard time every which way. And it's a bit daunting to be cross-examined by a High Court judge, as I'm sure you can imagine. But it went swimmingly, and he entertains a crowd. I mean, he must have been frustrated all those years sitting on the bench and having to keep sort of a straight face, because he just works a room like an old professional, and he throws away the lectern and just walks around with a microphone. And he had a lot of fun putting me on the spot. And in most cases, because he's a very, I shouldn't spend the whole time talking about Michael Kirby, but I'm really thrilled that he did take the time to write a foreword for us, a very considered foreword, and he read every single word of everybody's piece and had lots of suggestions to make, which is wonderful. I mean, it was an incredible opportunity to interact with people whom I've admired for a long time, including Shelley. I'm really thrilled that Shelley would do this tonight, and her work. I mean, I thought you went to Canberra a couple of months ago.
Oh, I also did a couple of weeks.
Here's someone who puts their life and their wherewithal on the line to work for. I was trying to, at another launch, I was trying to actually place this whole project in a very broad context. To me, it's not about gay, lesbian or same-sex attracted or even about marriage. It really is about equality. I don't think there's any such thing as gay rights. I think there are just human rights. The old slogan, gay rights are human rights. And there are still people who like to sort of divide things up, And my guru says, I've been studying with the guru for the last 39 years. Last Friday was the anniversary. He said, when the sun shines, it shines for everybody. The sun doesn't make any discrimination. And I've had lots of interactions with so-called religious people coming from different traditions who are still trying to drive a wedge between people, still trying to make, Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, everybody likes to have somebody looked down upon, And I just think it's fundamentally in error, And there are several psychologists here tonight, Paul Martin being one of them, former president of the Brisbane Jung Society is here, and Delora. I always get it wrong.
Depends which country.
Huh?
If you're in Italy.
Dilao. That to drive a wedge between a person and their sexuality is a very dangerous enterprise. But to do so with the imprimatur, of God, which is the biggest stick you can find to beat people about the head with, is a pretty nasty thing to do. And I recommend Paul Martin's article in this collection because he really gets into how the effect of shaming, the insidious effect of shaming on a developing psyche, what an evil thing that is to do. And to do that in the name of religion, to me, is irreligious. It's just completely off the planet. And all these nostrums we hear about love the sinner, not the sin, to me that sort of that's a piece of doublespeak that comes straight out of a George Orwell novel, when in fact there is something that I've learned how to tap into with my guru's help that really does support us all and embrace us all and doesn't separate. So I think we're really moving through what I see as an evolutionary shift. It's not just a paradigm shift. I think in developing societies, we're moving through a really deep-seated change in people's relationships with each other and with themselves too. I don't know where else to go from here. I've already said too much already. Why not have questions? Questions or comments. You don't have to agree. The other thing is, this is not just a univocal manifesto. Michael was criticising me also because we didn't have a cogent no case put anywhere in the book. And
Because there isn't a valid argument.
there isn't.
Bill Muhlenberg.
But remember, he's a High Court judge, and they're used to working in duality, where you have a pro case and a con case, and you're supposed to have the best. What's that? And you're supposed to have the most coherent person you can arguing the case for the prosecution and the defence. Well, who's prosecuting whom, and who needs to be defended? And I said to Michael, we've gone past thesis, antithesis, and this is synthesis. We're already there, And I said to him, who should I have given equal time to, equal space to? We could have gone to the two Bs, I call them, Barnaby and Bob Catter and Barnaby Joyce. The Australian Christian lobby was able to commandeer the resources of the great hall of Parliament House and get two prominent politicians to get up there spouting their nonsense. And we could barely pay... Sorry?
Can I just make a comment about that, please?
Yeah.
The thing is, yes, they did get like about 1,000 or something people there, but I don't think they actually won any friends because most of the sane MPs all went, oh God, that group. And it was really only like the two Bs that were really impressed. So I wouldn't worry too much about the good Christians being in Parliament.
But there's a couple of points I want to make on that. First of all, there's a new breed of Christian, like my publisher, this courageous man in Melbourne who takes on the risk, Gordon Thompson of Clouds of Magellan, who publishes about 6 books a year, a lot of them of interest to the gay and lesbian community, and he's married with children, He's coming from a really incredible place, and he takes the risk of every book himself. He gets no funding from any source. He's tried to get funding from the Australia Council. They had a special fund for small publishers to be able to have a marketing budget. Knocked back. And several of his books have been shortlisted for major literary awards. One novel won the Barbara Jeffress Award. So he's got a good eye. And there's someone here tonight who won a writing competition, who's having a novel published and put out in about a month's time. Errol Bray's
All right, Burzoo is the name of the novel. Watch out.
What's it called?
Burzoo.
Now this is my publisher. He's a Christian. What kind of Christian is that? They call themselves progressive Christians. And his wife actually thought of the title for the book, Speak Now. So I think there's a coming together, not a splitting apart. And I don't trust those influences. So I said to Michael, they had the resources. They could pull Parliament House. Why should I provide space in this book? We had to throw 20% of it out because it was too long. Why should I make room for some bozo to make some bogus case?
What do you have to achieve?
I just want to contribute to the national conversation because there isn't just one voice speaking here. You'll find just as many doubters here. And I was one of them. Michael sort of points that out, rather sort of underlines it in the foreword, that I'm not a converter in any way, but I've travelled solo most of my life. I've got a grandson, 19-month-old grandson. I've been gay, I've been straight, and I've been formerly celibate. I was a monk for nearly 12 years, you know. So I've tried it every which way, and I think people should be given the freedom to work out who they are by trying things, you know, not be afraid of whole areas, because you've got to shut down so much in yourself to try and fit into this two-dimensional model that's on offer in our society. You know, you're either this or that, and the bits that don't fit, what do you do with them? So I was coming back from a conference in Chicago, the year Barack Obama was elected, and I stopped off to see some old friends in LA, because I lived in LA for about 12 years. And they had been together then for 26 years, Greg and George. They jammed their surnames together, Greg and George Vogelmeyer. And they'd moved down to Long Beach. And earlier that year, early in 2008, the California Supreme Court struck down the laws against gay marriage, saying they're unconstitutional. So they went off and got married. After all that time, they were allowed to do it, and they proudly displayed their California, state license, the California seal on it. And then during that election, typically a bunch of right-wing Californians had done a write-in campaign and created one of those propositions that gets, if you get enough signatures, you can put it on the ballot. And it was called Proposition 8, and it banned gay marriage all over again. And so there they were, later in the year when they got married, and suddenly their relationship was all bouleversé, as the French say, just completely, the rug pulled out from under their feet. I arrived in town, and I was driving down to Long Beach where they lived, and there was a circle of helicopters swirling around over Long Beach. And I'd lived in LA, so I knew there'd be one police helicopter and 5 news choppers. And that's exactly what was happening, because there was a running demonstration in different cities each night after the election. In West Hollywood one night, Castro District in San Francisco another night, West Village in New York another night. And this night it just happened to be in Long Beach, where I was arriving. So we parked the car and walked up the street with the marriage certificate and joined a demonstration that had been going on for hours and hours. And the police had a great big loudspeaker on the back of the van saying, "In the name of the people of California, we're insisting that you," whatever it was, break up, dismiss, or you'll be arrested. In the name of the people of California. I thought, who have you been talking to? And of course, that had been playing for the last 4 hours and nobody went away. And it felt like the old moratorium days, Vietnam moratorium days. And I didn't care about gay marriage. I mean, I was impressed by the arguments for civil rights, and equal rights, but marriage, and I saw my friends, Greg and George, they were about 50, and I was in my 60s already. We were the oldest people there, and there were all these young gays and lesbians just bopping around, and Greg and George sort of adopted the mantle, it was placed them of being the elders, and I thought, look at the dignity of these men. They've always honoured their relationship. Doesn't that deserve respect? Basic human respect? And to try to divide people on the basis of their love and their commitment for each other seems to me pretty wrong-headed. So that sort of changed my mind. So I sort of converted to the cause of it. But nothing really happened until the publisher asked me to do this book. And in here you'll find lots of different positions. You'll find a mix of research results. What was your study called? Not So Private Lives. And Lynn Hillier from La Trobe has done those series of reports called Writing Themselves In, where she's now got 12 years of data on changing attitudes among same-sex attracted teenagers, or whatever the proper term is these days, young people. So. And that research and that data is now cited all over the world. So there's some really good, solid research-based articles here, but we also ask people to write personal testimony, and some of it's really moving. There's a lesbian lawyer, Pakistani Muslim Australian lawyer in Melbourne, who married a non-practicing Jewish lawyer, or wanted to marry, they were in a partnership. And she was paranoid about her Muslim father. And I won't tell you what happens because I want you to read that section. There's some beautiful pieces. Anybody else got anything to say? I'm going to rave on too much. Has anyone else got anything to contribute? So I think it's part of an ongoing conversation. There's no right or wrong answer here.
What is the legal status in Queensland of gay marriage? Are there no relevant to Queensland or is federal?
Marriage is, it's federal. Yes. And what I've got a letter written that I've got to send off to Anna Apply, asking her to put the motion forward that the Queensland Labor Party support the federal government with their marriage equality. But it used to be state up until about 59-61 now federal, and in some of the states like Tasmania, Victoria and the ACT they have relationship registers. That's all they have. There's no such thing as civil union, or not a true civil union, or no one can be married. And as Sharon can attest, she's had a civil union and she's been married to her partner and she's still not recognised here.
A lot of people have gone off to Canada to get married. And we've got an interesting thing at the back. We couldn't print his other article, but there's a famous jurist in the Netherlands named Kees van Dijk, however you pronounce the name. And he's he holds the world's first chair in sexual orientation law at Leiden University. And he wrote a very interesting piece for a legal journal, New England Legal Journal of Law, it's called, tracing the moves they made in the Netherlands to shift, through proper legislative procedures, and how they got it changed in the Netherlands and immediately in Belgium, and then the Scandinavian countries, and then Spain and Portugal and Argentina and parts of Mexico, and this year Brazil as well.
Look, the thing about Mexico is you can only get married in Mexico City, but the relationship is recognised throughout the whole country, and because everyone's getting married in Mexico City, the economy is booming.
So Case has done an appendix for us where he's made up a chart showing different countries around the world and the status, and he includes Australia and various states in the United States. You can get married in Vermont, Massachusetts. There was a hilarious cartoon when the Massachusetts law was passed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It's a really good political cartoonist named Mike Lukovich, and he had this cartoon where there's a couple of sort of dweeby-looking gay people in cardigans standing next to each other, arm in arm, in front of their white picket fence, and this rabid religious protester sort of saying, "Gays are evil," and he looks at them and says, "Can't you be a little bit more frightening?" So the times they are changing, but I think we do need to actually speak up about it. If you haven't actually contacted your Member of Parliament to say, actually, I am in your electorate, and I didn't get polled by you, but I want you to know that I do support this issue. We should all take a leaf out of Shelley's book and actually do something about it. So any more comments, any questions? Yes.
What happens with regards to superannuation assets? Partner relationship dies, and the superannuation assets fail.
Yes, they are now.
They are. That's all the legislation that was changed in 2007. So you have economic equality, where prior to that, if you had super and things, it would go up to your next of kin, not your partner. But now that's all changed.
Kevin Rudd, when Cynthia Roxon, is that her name? No. Nicola Roxon. When she was, I think, Health Minister, Shadow Minister for Health, back when I wrote her an email because somebody had done something, I think Obama had come out and supported something, and I sent an email around to lots of politicians, and I got 3 responses. One of them, which was the most personal, actually rang me back. It was a Green senator. Joe Hockey was another one, of all people. I don't think all political wisdom sits on this one side of the house, ever. And the other one was Cynthia. I'm getting wrong. Nicola Roxon. It's been a long week. And she just sent me a press release. but she promised that if Labor got into power, they would change all the inequitable laws and regulations. And they actually followed through on that. And when Kevin Rudd became Prime Minister, they changed 58 pieces of legislation and regulations and stuff to take away a lot of the inequities.
And I sort of point out that Labor shortchanged us by doing that. Normally when such changes are brought in, and they've done it in various areas, they put in a grandfathering clause so that people whose situations might be changed, impacted negatively, have a period of time or are exempted from it. In particular, this applies to social security payments, pensions, etc. For us, they didn't bother doing that. They shortchanged us and they treated us like dirt in doing that. So that's long-term relationships involving people on pension. So it's always the poor. It's never the rich. It's always the poor suffered as a result of those changes because of Labor's callousness in terms of it's attitude of here, we'll give you the crumbs now. And fuck the rest of you, we don't care about that.
Now you should be happy because we've
now
taken
you should be happy. So I also want to point out those changes that Labor did, yeah, they're good, but they treated us with disrespect in the way they did everyone else.
Absolutely. Nicola Roxon was the one who volunteered to speak to the religious rabble in August 2004. She off her own bat walked in and said, Labor will give you everything you want when you want to hate homosexuals. So Nicola Roxon has no positives.
I'll also add, as far as our state Labor government is concerned, marriage is a federal law, and marriage, of course, is a discriminatory institution itself, privileges couples, that sort of entrenches certain gender attitudes and sort of patriarchal attitudes anyhow. But marriage is discriminatory, it discriminates against plural relationships and a whole range of things. It's covered in the book, of course, too.
There's a very good article by Maria Polotokirova from Deakin University arguing for an expansion of the beyond the couples.
But state governments, our state government has been put to shame by Tasmania, because Tasmania has passed legislation recognising civil unions from overseas, recognising same-sex marriages from overseas, and establishing its relationships register, which is not just hung up on marriage-like heteronormative relationships, but recognises all sorts of different relationships. And that's the goal we should be moving to. We should be putting marriage down.
Now, that contribution, Michael Kirby is a biblical scholar, and he's written one of the most interesting articles in the whole book, if I can discriminate, tracing the churches, well, the Christian churches' ambivalent relationship with marriage through its history, because people sort of think that it was somehow divine, came down with the tablets on Mount Sinai or something, and it didn't. And Michael traces that. Michael's a very good biblical historian. He reads all the languages, he can quote from the original. So,
can't read Syriac.
Is that the only one?
I've been telling people you read at least 3 biblical languages.
Latin, Greek and Hebrew.
Yeah, well, I was right. Yes.
The most biggest agitator was the one that shocked you.
Shocked me was Maria Polotokirova, because she really puts down what she calls the couples cabinet. That shocked me, but it shocked me in a good way. And the interesting thing is that the publisher found that article probably the most interesting too. I mean, for someone who's really doing it, the traditional way, he welcomes these different points of view, and that's what I found most exhilarating about it, is that I didn't agree with half the people's contributions, So you won't get sort of hit over the head with a blunt polemic, It's very thought-provoking. And I sort of said in my little apologetic before I went into it, that when you're planning the seating arrangements of the wedding, the reception afterwards, you've got all these family politics about, will grandmother A talk to, second wife B, and should they be sat over here and that over there? And I just said, we just decided to put them together in alphabetical order and see and some interesting conversations have already begun. So I'm hoping you'll take it better than Michael Kirby. I think it's just being provocative. So thank you guys.